of this excellent book, Thrive State. If you haven't picked this up, please do. You will not regret it. He's going to tell us about how you can reclaim one's innate healing power. For those joining us live on LinkedIn Live, we're going to share the link so you can register for the event to participate in our Q&A with Dr. Vu at the end of this session, and then for the rest of today's sessions. So to everyone on LinkedIn Live, thank you for joining us. And now I think I'm ready. We're going to turn the stage over to Dr. Vu.
Hello.
Hello. It's so good to see you.
It's good to see me. Is my camera working?
Your camera does not appear to be working just yet.
Oh, let me try something here.
There we go. Hello.
All right. Hello. Good morning and welcome to my home. And this is a Chinese home, so I hope everybody's shoes are off right now, feeling comfortable. Show of hands right now. I'm going to see the people here. I see the panelists. I wanted you to raise your hand. Raise your hand right now if you've ever felt nervous or fearful of your health. Okay, great. Okay, I see a few hands there. Now, let me ask you a question. Show of hands again. How many of you out there would be interested in learning a concept that, if mastered, would put you in your own driver's seat of having optimal health, longevity, and peak performance? Show of hands. Great, fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now. Hello and good morning. I'm Dr. Qian Vu. I'm an assistant clinical professor at UCLA and a concierge performance and longevity physician. And over the course of this talk, I'm going to tell you how I actually became a disease statistic, but how it was scouring through many experts in many different fields and how I discovered this one thing that lies within all of us to put us back in that driver's seat of optimal health. And I really want to thank everybody for coming today, because it tells me that you really care about your health. And as you'll know, caring about your health really means caring about the world as well. So thank you for being here. And if you stay to the very, very end, I also have a very special gift for you. All right. So if you guys have your chat boxes handy, pull them up right now, because I want this to be interactive. I want you to go ahead and pull up the chat box right now. And I want to ask you a question I ask tons of my patients. Do you want the good news or the bad news first? Go ahead, fill it up in the chat right now. Good news, bad news. I'm seeing a few good, somewhat bad first. Yes, more good. All right. Now, you know, in the realm of optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, I want to give you a little bit more. The Westerns have a saying, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I want to give you the good, the bad, and the extraordinary. But let's start with the good news. The good news is this, and I don't know if you guys need a reminder, but we forget all too often that just by being alive right now, you won the evolutionary lottery. You are a miracle. And I don't mean it to sound cliche, but you've actually inherited the gifts and the genes of many generations of natural selections of the people that have come before you. You know what? If you were to ask Dr. Ali Benazar, who works at Harvard with degrees from Berkeley and Cambridge, he actually calculated the odds of you being alive right now. And guess what those odds are right now? Go ahead and put them in the chat. What do you think the odds are of you being alive right now? Put that in the chat. Let's see you guys go. Let's see, 1 in a billion, close. Okay, all right. He calculated for you to be alive right now, for mom to meet dad, for sperm to meet egg, and all those generations, for you to be alive, it's 1 to the 10 to the 2,865,000 chance of you being alive. That's 10 with 2,865,000 zeros behind that. And like every human being on this earth, you were born with greatness encoded in your genes. That chance of you being alive is nearly zero. Every human accomplishment is actually an example of what we're capable of. We've been able to put a man on the moon. We have the emotional intelligence to create great works of art. We've got the physical bodies to actually scale the world's highest mountains. And every person who lives past 100 is actually living proof that there is no artificial limit on how long we could live or even thrive. All of us actually have untapped potential for better overall health, greater human performance, and a longer life. But the tensions of the modern world, from our morning commute to our standard American diet or microwave lunch, to our seventh cup of coffee, often keep us from operating at full potential. And perhaps most importantly, our society's definition of success doesn't match up with a healthy lifestyle or even an authentic life. So here comes the bad news. The bad news is this. The bad news is that there's a high probability that you might be suffering from a chronic disease right now, even though you haven't been diagnosed yet. Chronic disease actually comes in a wide range of dispiriting options, from high blood pressure to arthritis to cancer to diabetes to a multitude of autoimmune diseases. In fact, 1 in 2 Americans have a chronic disease and 1 in 4 have multiple chronic diseases. These conditions have actually become a national and global epidemic. Conventional medicine is at advanced levels we've never seen before in history. And the United States currently spends more money on healthcare than we've ever spent, and more money per capita than any other industrialized nation. Yet we're also the unhealthiest we've ever been. Life expectancy in the United States has actually increased every year for nearly the past 60 years, but in 2014, it's actually noticed a dip. There's a very famous story about the Dalai Lama. And as the story goes, the reporter asked the spiritual leader, what surprised him most about humanity? And he said this: man surprised me most about humanity. I don't know if that's how he sounds, because he sacrifices his health in order to make money, and then he sacrifices his money to recuperate his health. Now, if you're a high achiever like me, you probably know what the Dalai Lama has talked about. You worked hard and smart all your life, putting in the long hours to reach the top of your game, and perhaps you sacrifice a little bit of happiness to get there. Or maybe you sacrifice a little bit of you to get there. You might find yourself stuck in neutral, lacking the strength, energy, or vitality to continue on your life's journey. You might be suffering from mental or physical conditions. Your relationships might be suffering. Heck, you might be suffering. I know this because I've lived it. I've been that chronic disease statistic. And let me tell you about how I shifted to a more healthier state in my own life, and how I took these lessons, combined them with traditional and non-traditional medical knowledge to develop a blueprint, one that you can use to reclaim your health. My journey began when I made the conscious choice to live a more authentic and purpose-driven life. And in this journey, I've discovered one of the most important lessons, which is that health is a personal discovery process. When you begin to master your health, you actually discover the power in all areas of your life. And that, my friends, is the extraordinary news. The extraordinary news is that within you lies the answers to your own blueprint to achieve optimal wellness, peak performance, and longevity, to unlock your greatness to share with the world. And I know this not because I'm a doctor, but because I've lived it. If we change not only our health practices, but our own definition of health, we're capable of a remarkable transformation, one that has ramifications that stretch far beyond our own lives. I envision a world where humans embrace a standard of health that enables us to be happier, to live more fully and more engaged, to contribute our gifts to humanity, to push humanity forward. I believe that if we change our health, we will change the world. Now that you heard the good, the bad, and the extraordinary news, let me ask you a few questions. Once again, in the chat right now, I want you to think about this. Answer these questions now in the chat. How would your life be different if you knew you can live a decade or two past what we normally think as a healthy lifespan? What more would you do in your life, in your relationships, in your business, if you had more energy, vitality, and mental capacity as you age? What more would you be capable of? Go ahead, put that in the chat. Let's see what people are saying. What would you do with all that energy and vitality? Great. Saving more money. That's great, Rachel. Now, if the answer to those questions start leaving you feeling energized and motivated for the future, I want you to continue to pay attention. Now, as a physician, I've worked with a lot of unhealthy people. And at one point, I was a very unhealthy person working with a lot of unhealthy people. I had type 2 diabetes, I was overweight, I had high blood pressure, and I was taking tons of prescription medications. And this was 12 years after practicing as an attending physician. Now, how then does this happen to somebody? How then does this happen to a medical doctor? Well, let me tell you a story of, let me tell you the story of my health discovery journey. It actually begins with my journey as an infant fleeing post-war Vietnam. My Chinese grandparents fled China to Vietnam at the end of World War II. And after the Vietnam War, our family was forced to flee again. You can see from that tiny screen over there that that was the conditions. When I was just a few months old, my parents scooped me up along with a handful of our worldly possessions, and we boarded a boat with over 2,000 refugees trying to sail to a better future. You know, our boat was actually anchored in Manila Bay for 8 months. And it doesn't take a doctor to know that those conditions were very, very poor. People fell off the boat. People died that way. People had disease. In fact, I had dysentery. And I remember, you know, my parents, and remember my father holding me like a baby. And he gets all choked up every time he says this. And I get choked up when I talk about it. But he said, you were having so much diarrhea, kid. I was lifting your legs up and they would just flop over. You were this floppy baby. I wasn't sure if you were going to make it. You know, 5 months ago, I actually had a very similar situation. My first daughter was born with her cord wrapped around her neck. And she was rushed to the ICU after she was born. And I wasn't sure if she was going to make it. You know, the first time I held her in my arms, she had a tube down her nose, a tube down her mouth. She had an IV in her arm. And she had all these pricks in her tiny little feet. And I remember just holding her and recognizing how precious life is, how grateful we should be. And you would ask Kien, after surviving 8 months on a boat, 3 months in a Philippine refugee camp, coming to America, this land of opportunity, you would feel so grateful as well. But that wasn't the case. I actually grew up in Chinatown, Los Angeles. It was a poor immigrant neighborhood. And I was fortunate, I got bused to a more affluent area for school. But being an Asian immigrant kid in a rich kid school was no walk in the park. I was constantly being bullied, from the holes in my hand-me-down clothes to the stinky food my mom sent me to school with. The kids would go, hey, go back to your home country, Chinky. Just like the guy from The Hangover. He sounded just like that. And those early experiences shaped me. You know, I have revenge in my mind. Not the violent or vindictive type of revenge, but the I'm really going to show you when I'm famous kind of revenge. And I remember my dream was to become famous. And I wanted to make people laugh like Robin Williams, inspire people like Tony Robbins, or rock the stage like Mick Jagger. But then I ran into a little bit of revenge reality. And the reality was, none of my heroes looked like me. None of them had my skin. In fact, the only representation of people, of Asian people I saw in the media were images just like this, Mr. Yunioshi, a caricature, more bullying in the media that I felt. So coming home from school, I found myself wishing I was actually someone else, someone who was taller, someone who was richer, someone who lived in a different neighborhood, someone who had a different family even. And I didn't know it at the time, but that desire to be someone else, this feeling that I was not enough, would actually dog me for years. In fact, that was actually the root of my chronic disease, and I'll explain why in a second. But growing up in an immigrant household, my career ambitions of being a rock star were, say, discouraged. My mom said, Kien, you have three choices. You can be a doctor, an MD, or a physician. And if none of you guys have Chinese mothers, when I say I had three options, those were the only three options. And so I went to medical school at UC San Diego. I then did an internship in internal medicine at the University of Hawaii. I did a diagnostic radiology residency at UCLA, followed by a fellowship in interventional radiology at UCLA. I got awards from the National Institutes of Health as well as the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. And I don't say all those things to impress you. I'm just saying them to impress on you all the conventional medical knowledge I had, but yet I was still sick. And after a decade of, over a decade of education, my career started to skyrocket. I was in a private practice group. I became the chief of interventional radiology at my hospital. My salary afforded me a fancy house. I got a fancy car even, and I even flew around the world giving these fancy medical speeches. I was this young, thriving interventional radiologist, and I thought I had it all. By many measures of life, I was now this unqualified success, but the same type of success the Dalai Lama was talking about. I wasn't happy. In fact, there were days I would wake up and I would look into the mirror and I didn't like the man I'd become. Underneath my white coat, I was overweight, I was diabetic, I had hypertension, and I was on prescription medications, many of them, even ones to help me fall asleep. And I felt terrible, not because I was just sick, but because I was living a lie. I remember always asking myself, how do I look into a patient's eyes and ask them to take care of their health when I'm a walking, talking chronic disease statistic myself? And that was my internal dilemma. I was this success on paper, but I didn't feel like a success. In fact, sometimes I felt like the harder I worked, the worse I felt and the more disappointed I got. The shame was actually compounded by painful developments in my personal life. I put so much pressure on myself to succeed, to get to the next level. I neglected my relationships. And I was in a committed relationship at the time, and she left me for another man. One day I was feeling particularly sorry for myself. I remember this day very vividly. I was actually rounding in the hospital, but I pick up the chart. I pick up the chart for this next patient, 43-year-old male, terminal pancreatic cancer, drained 10 liters of fluid from his belly. And I remember before I opened that door, I was thinking to myself, man, I got to pull myself together because here's a guy who probably has it a lot worse than me. But I remember this, I opened the door and I walk in the room and I was just met with so much positivity and energy and love. His name was Ishmael, and Ishmael looked at me and he says, Doc, how are you, man? Thank you so much for doing this for me. Man, I look like a big balloon, right? Thank you so much. This is going to make me feel so much better. And he was just so positive. And I just remember all his love just hit me. It hit me so, so hard. And I remember asking myself and asking him, Ishmael, how are you so positive right now? And he looked me in the eye and says, Doc, it's easy. Or maybe it's not so easy. I didn't spend my entire life like this. I used to be a very angry and stressed out person, but cancer gave me a gift. And that gift was knowing that at any point, no matter what I'm going through, I always have a choice on how I show up. And I choose to show up with joy and love. And he did that. And I felt that. And I felt him. And his words were so simple, but it had just been like I was shocked with a defibrillator. I mean, here's a man who is about to die, reminding me how to consciously live, reminding me that no matter what life circumstances, we always have a choice. We always have a what? Type it in the chat, choice. We always have a choice on how we show up. You know what? In medicine, when the body's out of alignment, if you take a look at the small screen here, it could actually put our bodies into a deadly or fatal rhythm. But even so, in any instance, we could always shock the heart back to a normal sinus rhythm. We could always shock it back as if hitting the reset button. Similarly, my life was actually out of alignment. But Ishmael's words inspired me to press my own reset button. And that led me to the life I was meant to live, the life that included reversing my chronic disease. His attitude actually shocked me back to a new rhythm. You know, modern medical care is symptom-centric. We're so focused on managing symptoms with medications that we fail to actually look at the root cause of disease. In fact, modern medicine doesn't even ask the question, where did this disease come from? If we have a symptom for it and we have a pill, we give that person a pill, whether it be for expediency or for patient satisfaction. That's what we were taught in medical school. But these symptoms, the elevated blood pressure, the abnormal glucose levels, the abnormal cholesterol levels, the fatigue, the pain, all these symptoms are not because we've got a medication deficiency in our body. They're actually signals from our body telling us, hey, wake up, take back your power and step into the fullness of who you really are as an amazing human being. And that's why I was sick. I was living a lie that denied who I truly was. I was this, quote, successful medical doctor, but I reached this place for all the wrong reasons. You know, even today, I am embarrassed to admit what it took me years to acknowledge to myself. I didn't choose to be a doctor just because I wanted to help people, nor was it because my mother made me, but hey, you tried to stop my mother. But no, I became a doctor to be respected, even though that deep down inside, I didn't have enough respect for myself. Deep down inside, I was still that young little boy that the other kids used to call chinky, taunt for being poor, who dreamed about being someone else. I've used that white coat with the initials MD embroidered in that coat to cover up for that not enoughness and shame I was feeling inside. I climbed this majestic mountain to success, only to realize I climbed the wrong mountain. Anybody right now, show of hands, anybody feel like they have followed the recipe of success to the T, but you were in the wrong kitchen? You know, at home at the hospital, I was always expected to be serious, stoic, and strong. But that wasn't who I was, at least not most of the time. I'm, as you can maybe tell, a little bit of a goofball, a little bit of an artist. I like to make people laugh. But as my superiors told me, Dr. Vu, there's no humor in medicine. And what did I do? I took that in and I dimmed my own light. I shut myself down. And that created stress in my body that actually later became the root of my chronic disease. More on that in a second. But after my encounter with Ishmael, and if you could see the small screen right here, I hit this right here, the reset button. Boom, I hit it joyfully. I started small with a few small changes to my daily routine, and that helped me lose a couple of pounds. Then I did changes to my sleep, my diet, my exercise routine. But more importantly, I changed my attitude. I reignited and explored the good human, the good-natured artist within me. I reprioritized my time so that I was spending more of it with the people that I enjoyed. And I started to approach every interaction with joy and intention. I started to push my personal boundaries. I started doing a little bit more public speaking like I am now, something I've sort of always enjoyed. I also started a show called Behind the White Coat. It was actually a mix of Hollywood, a little bit of comedy, and a little bit of education. And I found that that actually gave me an outlet for something I suppressed in myself for years. And that started the journey of reversing my chronic diseases. In 4 to 6 months, check me out. In 4 to 6 months, I lowered my blood pressure, reversed my hypertension, and cured my diabetes. I remember looking at my lab results and in the mirror, and I was stunned with joy and disbelief. The cool thing was I knew that it was me. It was not a medication. It was me that was responsible for this turnaround. I'd gone from feeling like an imposter to some great sense of accomplishment. And that wasn't even the best part. The best part now was that I started to have proof of concept that our everyday choices, and once again in the text box, choices, our everyday choices and our core purpose are our best medicine. And by changing my attitudes and my behaviors, I reversed not one, but two chronic conditions. And I knew I was onto something, but I wanted to learn more. And I suspect for you and for everybody that's watching here, it's not about reversing disease. It's about how we show up as our best. How do we become the superhero versions of ourselves? And so I dove in deep into nutritional science, which I didn't get in medical school. I went in deep into programs of personal growth and development, studied with spiritual shamans, went on plant medicine journeys. I studied biohacking. I then also went and did a fellowship in anti-aging and regenerative medicine. And I wanted to explore perhaps the greatest challenge in medicine and a question that stretches all the way back to Pythagoras. How can we live longer? It was actually through this fellowship that I began to develop my own understanding of a concept called epigenetics. Epi meaning above, genetics genes, which tells us that it's the external factors above the genes that actually controls how our cells behave. And it is epigenetics that tells us that our choices that we create our external environment with actually determine our overall health and our performance. And drawing from these lessons, I explored my emotions, my mindset, and my relationship with others. You know, I started to have conversations with my parents. Did you know up until 5 years ago, we hardly said I love you in my family, and my parents never hugged me? Well, we started to do more of that. You know, I now say I love you to my dad every time we answer the phone. It's still a little awkward. And mom, every time she leaves the house now, she would just say, oh, let me give my firstborn a hug. And that never happened. And it's starting to feel so good. And I worked on forgiving others. In fact, I even started forgiveness in myself for my own mistakes. I was starting to build new habits, but not more on the physical side, more on the spiritual side, like meditation, like journaling, like daily affirmations, like invitations of gratitude. But the results were I felt better, I looked better, as you can see there, less stressed, more energized, and the health benefits spoke for themselves. As I continued my explorations, I felt like I was straddling two worlds. On one world, I was learning about microbiome, telomeres, and mediator complexes. And then on this other world, I was learning about forgiveness, intention, and living in the present. Yet it was obvious that both of these worlds were actually reinforcing each other. True health is actually impossible without a sense of happiness and meaning. And in turn, your happiness is going to make you healthier. All the different wellness specialties were speaking different languages. But when I learned to translate, I recognized they were all saying the same thing. There's this ancient Indian parable about blind men touching an elephant. One blind man feels the tail and thinks it's a rope. Another blind man feels the trunk and thinks it's a snake. Somebody feels the tusk and thinks it's a spear. The moral of the story is this: no one person has a monopoly on the truth. I was one of those blind men, and I only examine health through the lens of Western medicine, through the lens of medications and surgery. But with all these additional specialties that I got into, I started to see more of this elephant. And as I started to continue to learn, I almost found myself unconsciously developing a framework, synthesizing knowledge I was gaining from so many different sources. And I always found that I learned better when I put everything under the overarching idea. And I came up with something called the bioenergetic model for health. You see, I developed my clinical practice as an interventional radiologist. And for those of you who don't know what that is, well, radiology is medical imaging. So that's CT scans, X-rays, ultrasounds, PET scans, MRIs. And we were able to use all these technologies to pierce inside the body to see what disease looks like. So I knew what all the diseases were, what they looked like in the body. But as an interventional radiologist, I was actually able to use all these sophisticated technologies to do minimally invasive procedures. I could drive into a blood vessel and open them when they're clogged. If a blood vessel was bleeding, I was able to stop that bleeding. I could even drive through a blood vessel and deliver chemotherapy to a tumor. I can use these imaging technologies to put a needle into a tumor and burn it and freeze it. But even with all these sophisticated technologies, some of the most advanced technologies, known to man right now, they don't give me the big picture, like how resilient or forgiving you are, whether you're holding on to emotional trauma, whether you're living with joy, passion, and purpose in your life, whether you're actually contributing to your community or just taking from it. And you might be asking right now, why would a medical doctor need to know any of that about you? Well, all these things make up something called your bioenergetic state. This state is actually the energy, the vibration, the frequency that's actually broadcasted through all of your cells, and it gives your cells the instructions to either thrive or to enter a disease state. So let me go back to the title of my talk right now, the ultimate driver of optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. Go ahead in the chat right now, pull up your chat again. Let me ask you, what systems do we need in our body to have optimal health, longevity, and peak performance? Let's go ahead, poll the people, throw it in the chat. What do you think we need to have those things? ECS, I'm not quite sure I know what ECS is. Okay, health, a digestive system, very good. You need a good digestive system for nutrients. Okay, yes, we needed to have a gut microbiome. We need to have what? A good immune system, very good. All right, we need a good cardiovascular system, very, very good. Okay. We also need a good nervous system to be able to react, right? We need that good immune system to ward off cancer and bacteria. So we need all our systems to fire at 100%, 110% for us to achieve these three things. So what are these systems made of? Well, these systems are actually made up of different organs. Okay, and these organ systems, what are they made of? Different tissues. And what about these different tissues? What are they made of? Well, they're made up of individual cells. So we need each individual cell to function at their very best. We need a lung cell to be able to extract all that oxygen for the rest of the body, your heart cell to be able to pump all that blood to the rest of the body. We need all of them to work at their best to produce good tissues, optimal organs, optimal systems, giving us optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. Well, what is the flip side of that? What if your cell is not operating at its optimal level? Say they were suboptimal. Say all of a sudden your lung cell only extracts 50% of the oxygen. Well, all of a sudden 50% of the oxygen, the rest of your body can't handle 50% of the oxygen. So your other cells start to tank. See, every cell provides a very important role. Every cell has that purpose. So if you've got suboptimal tissues, that leads to suboptimal organs, that leads to suboptimal systems. Guess what? A suboptimal cardiovascular system will give you atherosclerosis, heart attack, and stroke. A suboptimal immune system will give you chronic infections, autoimmune disease, and cancer. A suboptimal nervous system will give you dementia and Alzheimer's disease. It's these suboptimal systems coming from suboptimal cells that are actually the cause of physical symptoms as well as chronic disease. So you can see optimal health, longevity, and peak performance is actually the flip side of the coin of chronic disease. So your question then is, how do you get optimal cellular health? If cellular health determines the difference between optimal health versus chronic disease, how do we master cellular health? So that's the question there. And let me bring up this thing here. You guys might think, oh, okay, well, it's probably DNA. You take a look at the small screen there. Sorry for the small screen. You might think it's DNA. So what is DNA? We actually get a strand from mom. We get a strand from dad, okay? And this actually is all the genes that you actually have in your body. Every single cell that you have has the exact same DNA. Again, one strand from mom, one strand from dad. I'm going to play this video again because a lot of you are saying this is pretty cool. So we have that, and that's all the genes that we have in our body. But an eye cell is different from a heart cell, is different from a lung cell. And why is that the case when all of the DNA is the same? Well, it turns out that not all the genes are actually played at the same time. For all you sports junkies that are out there, the DNA is kind of like the playbook with all the different plays in the playbook. Or for all you techies, if you got a phone, the DNA is almost kind of like all the programs and app on your phone. The thing is, not all the programs or not all the plays are all played at once. And it's when you call that play, when you turn on that gene, which genes are turned off, which genes are turned off, that actually determines how a cell is expressed. That actually determines cellular health. So here's the concept of epigenetics. And the concept of epigenetics tells us this, that the fate of our cells is actually not the genes that reside in it, but actually how these genes interact with its environment, what I term the bioenergetic state. It's our bioenergetic state that tells our DNA how to act, which genes to be turned on, which genes to be turned off. And you give the cell the right bioenergetic cues, it will flourish, it'll be rich with energy, it will live longer and support the growth and healing of the cells around it. You give it the wrong cues, well, a cell will be diseased, it will be inflamed and potentially destructive to the other cells. And here is the good news. We are ultimately in control of our cellular environment. We are ultimately in control of our bioenergetic state through our choices. That same thing that Ishmael said. At any given moment, you are a walking radio station, and the individual component of your cells are actually the audience of that radio station. You are not only broadcasting outward to other people. So yes, other people could feel your energy. So don't be a jerk to other people. And also don't be a jerk to yourself and your own cells, because you're making that broadcast and that energy and your DNA is taking marching orders from that energy on a moment-to-moment basis. So the next question might be, what determines the content of your broadcast? Everything. Every input into your body is energy, and energy is neither created nor destroyed. This includes the foods that you eat, the sleep that you accrue every night, the exercise you eke out on during the day, but it also includes your mental state, your environmental stressors, and the tangled emotional things that you experience every single day. Every input that comes into our body, whether it be a light input, so I've got this light coming in, we've got light energy, it hits the receptors in my eye, that gets transmuted to a nerve action potential, then it goes up to my brain, which starts to release hormones. So energy is always being transmuted to each other. And you think of these signaling molecules like our hormones, our neurotransmitters, peptides, enzymes, signaling molecules will actually take the energy, translate them into these small molecules, and then talks to our DNA. And we basically are just this collective conversation of all these chemical processes. Now, these signals that drive genetic expression will actually ultimately dictate our cellular activity. And there are basically two main pathways that our cells could take. Our cells could either thrive, and again, we control our bioenergetic state, and we can put it in the thrive state, which again, the ultimate driver of optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. Or we're giving ourselves the signals that we're in a stress or a danger state. So let's examine this here in a second. You guys don't need to take notes, because in that free gift, you'll have basically all the information and all the science that goes along with this talk right now. So let's briefly go over this. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could say we are chronically healthy? And it's probably easier than you may think. When our cells receive the optimal bioenergetic state, what I call the thrive state, your cells actually receive the instructions to grow, heal, and to thrive. Your sex and your well-being hormones actually will increase. It will give you a sense of joy, happiness, and a heightened libido. You will experience improved immunity, making you better equipped to fight off pathogens, toxins, and cancers. Your cell's power plants, or the mitochondria, have improved efficiency and energy output. The mitochondria actually makes ATP, which supplies the energy to drive all your biological processes. So when your cells have more energy, you have more energy. This thrive state is actually the state of regenerative growth and healing. It's also the state of vitality, optimal performance, and longevity. So let's take a look on the other side of that column, the stress state. Well, when you're giving your cells the signal that it's stressful, it actually diverts all the biological mechanisms. It diverts that energy from thriving for protection. And inflammation is actually the key biological process in that stress state. Cells actually age quicker and unable to repair themselves. The mitochondria are less efficient in generating ATP. You've got lower levels of sex hormones and feel-good hormones, which might give you feeling stressed or might give you a mental disorder or an emotional disorder. The stress state puts the body into overdrive and exhaustion, which prevents not only optimal functioning, but the development of those chronic symptoms like a disability, pain, brain fog, weight gain. See, the body physiological response from daily life actually mimics that of our ancestors running away from a saber-toothed tiger. What happens in this situation? Well, your nervous system diverts from parasympathetic to sympathetic. So your blood thickens and clot easier because, heck, you might get bitten by the saber-toothed tiger. Your immune system will shut down. Why does it shut down? Because why protect against viruses or cancers when you need to run away and you're potentially breakfast for a predator? Blood diverts from your visceral organs to your skeletal muscles to run away from this predator, but this impairs other organs such as your kidneys and your gut. And while this stress state is very advantageous for an actual stress, such as being bitten by this predator or recovering from a car accident, it's chronic activation in today's world of perceived threats. The mean bosses, somebody cutting you, cutting in front of you in the freeway, spilled milk, deadlines, that actually creates the backdrop. This stress creates the backdrop of all this chronic disease. Again, that's how I got sick. And of the numerous environmental signals that could potentially affect the behavior of the cell, I've actually identified 7. I've worked with an epigeneticist at UCLA, and if you want to know the 80-20 rule of epigenetics or the 90-10 rule even, you'll master these 7 things. And if you take a look, sorry, at the small screen here, the things that actually make up these 7 things, I call them the 7 Bs, or the 7 bioenergetic elements, are sleep, nutrition, movement, stress and emotional control, our mindset, thought, relationships and community, and purpose. Just like that over there. These are the 7 bioenergetic elements. And this is the bioenergetic model for health. And if you take a look at this here, you'll see that everything here is interconnected. Energy is neither created nor destroyed, but you, through your conscious thought, can uplift this energetic system. And everything's interconnected. So say, for example, if you improve on one bioenergetic element, you're going to make it so much easier to improve on another one. Why? Because they're energetically connected. For example, if you sleep better, your growth hormone increases and your testosterone will increase. That will give you more energy. Well, what are you going to do with more energy? Well, you can now exercise. All of a sudden, you're going to exercise. You'll increase endorphins in your body. You'll increase BDNF for your brain, and you'll detoxify your body at the same time. Guess what? You're going to start to feel good. Well, when you feel good, what will happen? It will improve your gut. When you feel good, you also think good, and you'll start to make better choices and maybe live with more purpose. You can see that these are all energetically connected. And that's the term called bioenergetic resonance. Once you start working on a few of these things, you'll notice that the energy and the vitality of your body will just increase. And everybody knows right now, if you read any textbook, everybody, I think, knows that sleep, nutrition, movement, and stress control is pivotal when it comes to our physical health. But one will never actually optimize our bioenergetic state, our bioenergetic potential, without purpose and community, or purpose and our relationships. And there's a reason why our genes are wired in this way. This is actually, this mutual dependence on each other, this symbiotic relationship is how multicellular life evolved. There was one cell that basically said, hey, you know what? Life is a lot easier. You do this one thing, I do this one thing, let's work together. And that's how multicellular life evolved. We are all basically who we are because our lung cells, each individual cell in our body is doing its own thing to contribute to the entire body. So a lung cell has to do its job of extracting oxygen for the rest of the body, to gain a lung cell has to do their job so that all the cells can get oxygen. But let's just say this, let's just say that a cell decides it doesn't want to do that, or it doesn't want to contribute to the community. Heck, I just want to do my thing for myself. Well, all of a sudden, if a lung cell collapses and only extracts 50%, like we talked earlier, the rest of the cells will not be able to do its job as well because it's not getting that rich nutrient. The whole system will shut down. In fact, if one cell decides it doesn't want to help out the community and just live for itself, well, really, that's a cancer cell. And that's exactly what cancer is in the body, is a cell not contributing to a community. So we basically are this conversation, and basically we ourselves are meant to thrive as individuals, yes, but just so that we can give back to the collective whole, just so that we can give back to the community. And this happens, and when this happens, we are at our most elevated bioenergetic state. You know, Picasso had a phrase, and again, look at the small screen over here. The purpose, the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away. So the next question is this: what is your gift? You know, I used to think of this question all the time, thinking it, you know, I needed to, am I running out of time? Sorry. What is your gift? Well, it's simple. It's actually not something that you have to find. It's something you remember. Your gifts are the things that make you feel joy, passion. And when you share that joy and passion with other people, that is your purpose. And when you start to share your purpose with your community, you'll find that you wake up better, you start feeling better, because it's so much easier to make better choices for your health when you're feeling good about yourself. And that's what I love about this bioenergetic model. It means that our choices actually dictate our health. And going from a low to a high bioenergetic state means going from cultivating emotions such as trust, love, and gratitude instead of indulging in fear, anger, or hate. And in doing so, we choose to act from our hearts instead of our heads. And after all, we are simply cells in the larger body of humanity. And whether we realize it or not, we always have a choice in how we show up in the world. And there's a very excellent quote by Viktor Frankl. He said, between stimulus and response, there's a choice. And in that space, there's a power. Sorry, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose a response. And in a response lies our growth and freedom. I made new choices, and I'm happy to report I'm an ideal weight. I am free of prescription medicines, and I no longer have chronic disease. And heck, I'm in the best shape of my life. My healing began when I started accepting, loving, and living as the true me. And the same is true for you. If you have symptoms in your life, or if your life is out of alignment, don't wait for a shock. What would happen if you just chose to press reset right now, to own the power of your choices? When we deny who we are, when we deny our passion and purpose in life, we put a cap on our potential for health, because you were born to be limitless, to feel exuberant, to give something unique to the world. Remember, your purpose is you, and you are your best medicine. Thank you very much.
So excellent. Thank you, Dr. Vu. I mean, I feel like personally like so inspired and motivated. I mean, since we're using the chat, hey, hands up if you're like totally motivated and inspired to take action, not just for your own health, but we learned so much in terms of information that we can share with our consumers. And there's more, a really specific outline of the plan and program and recommendations in the Thrive State book. And one thing that I'll just say that I really loved, I like devoured this book, that you really build on these small steps. And I think for people working with consumers, and we know that sometimes it can be, you know, a challenge, you know, helping people to get and stay on track. So it really breaks it down into these small steps. So thank you for that. We are basically out of time. We did have questions come in. So what I'm hoping, if you're open to it, is that maybe we can do a follow-up with some bonus content. You and I can just jump on a Zoom and answer some of these questions and then share that with
Of
people
course.
later.
I put in the chat the free gift. If they want to get all the science behind the talk, whatnot, you get the free gift. You get actually all the figures here in this talk. So I'm also happy to get on with you, Maggie, to speak and answer the questions.
Excellent. I could talk to you all day, so I'm jazzed for that. Well, thank you to Dr. Vu.